My name is Wendy Hernandez and I'm literacy coach for a high school.
Hi, my name is Ernest Simpkins. I am the MSM coordinator at Boston Glass.
Quincy J. Roberts, co-founder of the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition.
My name is Kendra Graves and I'm the program associate with the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition.
My name is Carmen Leah Asensio. I'm the project manager for Todas, which is an interagency collaboration of the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition, the network La Red, the Violence Recovery Program, and Renewal House, a program of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry.
When I think about that question, my first encounter would probably be from childhood, and I didn't notice it was abuse. It would probably be with my biological father, verbally abusing my mom, talking down to my mom, and I didn't realize that was abuse at the time. So that would be my first encounter. As I got a little older, started dating on my own, I got into a relationship with an older man, and that relationship was probably like my first personal experience and first-hand experience with abuse.
Domestic violence and partner abuse directly affects me because it affects people in my community. Working with the Todos Project, I've met a lot of people who are survivors, and to hear their stories creates a feeling in me that makes me want to do something about it to help them heal and also help us start to prevent domestic violence and partner abuse.
Most recently, I was in a situation where I was emotionally abused, but I really didn't realize that that was happening to me because I didn't know what it was. I knew that I was very on edge and that I felt like I was walking on eggshells, and I felt really bad about myself, but I didn't know what was happening to me until I actually started doing some research, and I told one person, and all the research that I had been doing mentioned all of the symptoms, and they were the very same things that were happening to me, and it was just like a very a realization that kind of knocked me out. I was like, wow, how can I be in a situation like this when I am such a person that has her life together, and I have an established career and I make decisions, but in this relationship I was powerless, and I kind of wanted to die the way I felt. I wanted to just, I didn't know how to make it stop. Well, one of the things that happened a lot was the stonewalling, where if I did something that she didn't like, she would stop talking to me, but I didn't know why. Or she would say, "You're asking such a stupid question, that's just so stupid." Or she would throw things, or she would yell at me in public, and I would say, "Please, just don't talk like that in public," and just like made me feel like she didn't even like me. And I didn't think that that was abuse. I felt abuse. I felt like I felt when I was growing up, and my family would say to me, "You're so stupid," or "You are going to amount to nothing." And I felt bad about myself, but I just thought that, maybe if she stops, it'll be fine. And she never hit me, until the end.
Well, the first year we were together a little over 2 years, I would say 2.5 years. The first year, fantastic. Everything that I thought I wanted in a spouse or a partner. He had way more money than I did, had a very, very good job, he spoiled me, took me out, just showed me what I thought life had to offer. About the second year, we went out among some friends, and we got home and he was just like, I'm tired of you flirting with all these guys. And I'm just like, flirting with all these guys? And then he became really, really aggressive in the bedroom that night and going forward. That's when I knew something was a little off, because, you know, the first year everything's peachy, and then you just transition into this very, very dark and negative person. So that's when I knew something wasn't right.
I think one of the most important things that was really obvious from the survey that the Todas Collaborative did was that our community is saying that partner abuse is not talked about in our community. And that's really one of the first steps in sort of stages of change and sort of addressing problems, is actually just that the problem is acknowledged. And in our survey, 85% of people who responded said that partner abuse is rarely or maybe sometimes talked about. And the majority of that was people saying rarely or never talked about.
Findings from the survey that was interesting for me was that people are feeling as though the spiritual support around healing from domestic violence and partner abuse is not there from our faith-based institutions. And it's really important that people feel that they can go to a place that feels like home to address an issue that really, at the core, breaks your spirit. And so I was really glad to see that a lot of people are okay with bringing up the fact that churches and other religious institutions aren't being as supportive of survivors of domestic violence and partner abuse, but also LGBTQ communities as well.
Where should I begin? I think that the media does not do a good job in covering what domestic abuse is, and all the forms of domestic abuse. I think that the media is very attracted to the most dramatic stories, and not to even belittle those situations, because I think all of those situations were valid and legitimate, and unfortunate. I think that the media does not talk about and cover the fact that there's probably a lot more forms of abuse, and there are, around sort of control. And, you know, I think that that's number one. I think number two, I think that it really begins to sort of obscure the fact that it's not just relationships that are between a man and a woman that experience domestic violence and domestic abuse, same-sex relationships, whether that's two men, whether that's two women, whether that's two trans folks. You know, I think that that also sort of needs to be sort of brought, because I think for me, you know, it didn't register that was something that it was called the same thing for me. As silly I know it kind of sounds, but it didn't register that between two men, if that control, that it was still domestic abuse and still domestic violence.
It was very, 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 very difficult for me to actually seek professional help. Being black, being male, being gay was just all no-nos. For me, one, I was in the closet at the time. So in order for me to seek help through my family, I would have to out myself. For me to seek help from my friends, I looked weak. And just me going to seek professional help, I didn't feel comfortable doing that, because domestic violence, domestic abuse is just, well, according to my community and where I come from, it's just a white thing, which is not true. Now I know this now, it's not true. So those things, it was very difficult. Those things made it difficult for me to actually seek help.
When folks of color have worked so hard sometimes in order to be able to affirm their own sexual orientation or gender identity and then find themselves in an abusive relationship, it can be incredibly challenging to come out and talk to people about the fact that, yes, I'm really proud of my sexual orientation, but right now my sexual orientation or gender identity is tied to a really negative experience. And there can be a lot of shame around that and not wanting outside communities to think that, see, you're queer or you're gay and see that's dysfunctional and that's what's going on and I told you so. So there really can be that extra barrier to being able to talk about that or acknowledge the fact that, yes, I'm proud of my identity and I am in an abusive relationship, and those things don't have to do with one another. They are not caused by one another.
Well, I think it is a topic that is not discussed a lot in communities of color, and when it is discussed, it's very targeted and very specific to physical abuse. And in LGBT communities, it's almost looked at as a joke. How can another woman abuse you, or how can another man abuse you? It's, you know, and so especially if the person is younger than you, and then you kind of you're kind of looked at as dramatic if you say that the person was emotionally abused you. So you don't, because you think that it's just another it's just another fight among lovers, right? And so I just think that a lot of people don't know what that means. What is emotional abuse? And even my partner at the time would disagree that she was emotionally abusive.
I think domestic violence and partner abuse is so taboo because a lot of people in Black and Hispanic and Latino communities are taught growing up that what happens in your family is supposed to stay in your family. That family issues, whether it's money or love or sex, it stays in the family. And so if you're taught from the time you were young that you don't talk about what happens in your family, then even if something really bad is happening in your family, you're not going to talk about it. So it just creates a culture and an environment and a tradition almost of silence around violence that happens in the home or violence that happens between intimate partners.
I think one of the most important things is to begin to talk about this with your peers and with your friends, because that's the first place that most people go to for help. And if just some of you know where these resources are, talking about this with your friends is the most important way that we can begin to support and give voice to and reduce the shame around the fact that partner abuse also happens in our community.
I think that more community circles, more workshops, just more conversations about what it really means to be emotionally abused and what it really means to be abused, to be in an abusive relationship. Because being in an abusive relationship is verbal abuse. It's a person doesn't even have to hate you, you know. And I know in my relationship I almost wish she did, because I felt like if she did, then I actually had a reason, you know, because my feelings didn't, what was I gonna say? She's abusing me because I feel like she's abusing me. And someone could say, well, that's your opinion about it. Whereas if she had hit me, there was no opinion. This is what happened, you know. And so I think that there has to be conversations around how verbal abuse and emotional abuse really is abuse.
We need to end the cycle that this whole what goes on in this house stays in this house cycle, because nobody gets healed if it stays in the house. Nobody becomes free from their unhealthy relationships if it stays in the house.
I think what's next for us as a community is that we start to have these conversations about domestic violence and partner abuse and what people have experienced, that we start to build understanding about what domestic violence and partner abuse is, because a lot of people are in abusive relationships and don't understand them to be that. And as you start to give people the language and the definitions to understand how they feel and what they're going through, from there they'll feel more comfortable to have the conversations that are necessary to break the silence. And then from there we can connect them to the resources that are already available. So part of the TOTOS project is to improve and increase access to existing services. So we have other agencies in our collaboration, like the Violence Recovery Program at Family Health, Network La Red, and the Renewal House, which is a DV shelter, that already provide services to domestic violence and partner abuse survivors. And it's important that people know that the services exist. They feel comfortable to be able to access the services because they know that there are people there who are a part of their community, understand their culture, and have the knowledge and expertise to be able to provide the services in the best way possible. And from there, we can just continue to create a network where people understand what's happening, feel comfortable to access the resources or the support that they need, and they go get it. And from there, we heal, and then we continue to support each other in our healing because it's an ongoing process.
Every time I had the chance and the opportunity to tell somebody what was going on, I felt like I was gaining more and more power back, and ultimately more and more power to finally escape. Because I think just in the act of speaking out about something and sort of speaking it into the universe, and sort of, I feel like you begin to completely give yourself, you change your perspective completely when you start speaking it out.
Something that really helped me to heal is to talk about it to other gay men of color. Just seeing that I wasn't alone helped me. Talking to organizations like Network La Red and some of the people that work there and the wonderful work they do, that helped out a little bit. But I think the most healing that I'm getting is what we're doing right now with the TOTOS project. I think showing a face, having a face to domestic violence survivors or domestic abuse survivors helps me. Telling my story helps me. Seeing other people going through this, knowing that I'm not alone and they're not alone, it definitely helps me.
Believe in yourself. Believe in what you feel. If you feel as though this relationship is not what you want it to be, it's not loving, it's not healthy, rely on those feelings and be willing to talk to someone about it, because 9 times out of 10, even if they haven't been through that situation and they can't relate to it on that level, they care enough about you to help you try to figure out how to remove yourself from the situation and get the healing that you need. So be open to what others in our community have to offer, and if you're someone that is connected to someone who's a survivor, be open to their story, be willing to listen and hear them out, and also be knowledgeable about the resources and the services that are available to people in our community, because we need each other. We need to be able to rely on each other to be able to get through these situations.
Go out and talk to somebody. Talk to a friend. If you don't feel comfortable talking to a friend, it'll be plenty of information on this video that you can reach out to one of us, some of the professionals that do this every day. Talk about it. Release. Never hold it in, because that was my problem. I held it in too long and developed all this anger and resentment towards people who really didn't even have anything to do with that particular relationship. So my last thoughts would be talk about it, release, let it go, because you're not alone.
Believe it or not, a lot of people who are very accomplished that have gone through this, and I would say to a person who is going through that to actually just reach out, because they might get support in places where they didn't even think that they could get support from.
The good news is that right here in Boston, that there's actually many agencies that are here to support LGBT people of color dealing with partner abuse. 4 agencies, of course, that I would speak to are the Network La Red, the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition, the Violence Recovery Program, and Renewal House. All 4 of these agencies are working together to address and highlight the issue of partner abuse.
Please know that it is not your fault. You are not to blame at all, despite what anyone else might say. And please, this is probably the most biggest part of it, is that talk to someone. Talk to someone that's going to give you unconditional support. Going to give you support if you decide to leave tomorrow, and going to give you just as much support if you decide to leave, not to leave. I think that's first and foremost. And if you need to talk to somebody that's not related to you, that you don't know, there's a lot of resources out there for domestic violence and domestic abuse. So please check that out. Please be safe and break the silence.